Hi, and welcome back to my art and fiction channel. And this week I'm going to be reading for you a short story called Beyond the 16th Minute. Synthetic bristles rasped over the rough grain of the shed wall, spreading green gloop and accidentally plastering a spider. Mike watched the doomed creature flounder against fate before it flattened onto the surface of the panel. Its corpse would remain there, preserved for decades. He felt mean, but there was nothing he could do, so he dipped his brush back into the litre tub by his feet and knuckled down to a job he hated but knew had to be done. What a way to spend a Sunday. Life didn't used to be like this. Once he'd have been off with his mates somewhere, downing a few pints, checking out some new band and some new girls, and simply having a laugh. Now he worked hard to keep a roof over their heads, and Suki worked just as hard to pay for everything else. It was fortunate that Kyle was 16 now and could be trusted to fend for himself while they were out. Suki had been a star for taking the pair of them on. Mike dipped the brush again and began painting more carefully round the shed's plastic windows. He didn't want a scruffy, wobbly edge around the panes. Anyway, today was probably one of the last warm autumn days, and it felt good to be outdoors. Tomorrow promised only another round in the endless cycle of work, sleep, work. Yeah, a lot had changed. 10 years ago, he'd have blown the scene, took his son and his gear and... go where? Crash on a mate's floor? He'd never go back to squatting again, not with a kid to take care of. Even he wasn't that much of a failure. Once he'd have returned to his long-suffering grandmother's house, but she'd died a few years back, and her absence felt like a huge hole. A hole he hadn't even suspected might be there until there it was, like some bone-freezing chasm. Suki had helped him to get through that too. Mike dipped the brush into the tub of wood preservative again. His back was beginning to ache from stretching and bending. Some of the green gunk had dribbled onto his jeans. It didn't matter. They were an old pair, kept for jobs like this. The zip had broken, and he'd threaded the fly with a shoelace. Memory, like a fish surging through dark waters, darted to the surface and gulped down air. The girls at the front of the stage kept trying to catch hold of the shoelace, keeping his pants this side of legal. They wanted flesh, his flesh, but he knew the game, knew how to tease with a smile and a nifty sidestep, knew how to move so his hair shook with the soaring chords ripping from his guitar, knew how to step up to the microphone to add body to the rising chorus, knew how to fill his patch of the stage without making the error of stealing limelight from the volatile singer. Yeah, know your place, new boy. He'd been stunned when offered a place in the Midnight Express. These guys were really going places. They'd been all over the national music press for months. They'd just been signed by a subsidiary of a big label, a real-life major record company, not some backstreet take-your-cash-and-flip merchant. And goodness knows he'd already been burned by too many of those on his way up through the ranks. Money makers, dream takers, all talking big while they empty your wallet. Chalk it up to experience. What else could he do? The band he had already been gigging with had had a string of dates lined up, but had been left without money. No money meant they couldn't pay the van hire company, and without a van, they had no way of transporting their gear or themselves. Up a creek without a paddle once again. The acrimony kicked off, and he was still fuming when a slot in this other, better band opened up, so he had jumped ship. His old bandmates had never forgiven him. So there he was, lead guitarist with the Midnight Express, his face in the papers and a new car in the garage of his 5th-storey apartment. Compare that to life in a squat, grubbing for enough change to head to the chip shop for one meal a day. Gigs were packed out. Their debut album was selling well. Journalists hounded his old school friends for scraps of anything they could twist into a tale. People he'd only vaguely known were suddenly his best friends. And girls were everywhere. Everything was on offer. Everything had changed. And everything was also the same. The acrimony, the fighting, the money worries, the jerk of a singer who thought he ranked above the other band members because he'd had a brief taste of fame once before. Well, Mike brought plenty to the table too. He'd been in bands as soon as he'd first figured out how to hold a guitar, before he'd learned how to play the thing. He paid for guitar lessons at night school, but told everyone else he was self-taught because that sounded cooler. He began growing his hair, the long, luscious hair that girls screamed over night after night when he plied his stagecraft with the Midnight Express. But John Ray truly had been a jerk. He just didn't get that a band has to work as a unified team. Music's an art, sure, but you have to run any band as a business. The money side of things, the practicalities of management, marketing and promotion need diligent attention. It can't be 3 for me and 1 for you, and then leave nothing to cover the bills. Even as they began recording their second album, the Midnight Express was grinding onto rough tracks, and it showed in their songs. Premature was how the music press penned it. Sounds like the edits from their last project. The album bombed. The record company dropped them. Phones stopped ringing overnight. And John Ray needed someone to blame, so he blamed Mike. So Mike was out of the band. Just like that. No debate. Mike dipped his brush into the tub of wood preservative and angrily mashed the bristles against the shed wall. Then he sighed through clenched teeth. Why was he getting wound up over this years later? It wasn't as if any of the others had gone on to fame and fortune either. They'd all played in bands since, of course, sometimes finding their way into the music press again, but none of it had ever amounted to much. Life moved us down a poorly foreseen path, despite attempts at prophecy. His girlfriend, Paula, had been pregnant with Kyle by then, and Mike did what he thought was the right thing and stood by her, even when his mates told him that nobody bothered with this anymore. Yeah, well, he'd always been a decent sort, so even though he and Paula hadn't been dating for long, they married. The car had to be sold, but he managed to hang on to the apartment. But Paula didn't want the real Mike, the flesh and blood, quiet bloke who just loved to play guitar. The real Mike did normal things like soak his socks in the sink and make beans on toast for dinner, and mope around in comfy clothes and sleepily watch TV. Paula wanted the version of Mike she saw on stage. Well, sorry, but that guy didn't exist. He came home to find her gone, and baby Kyle left wailing in his cot, soaked through and hungry. No message other than for the empty wardrobe. So that was Mike. Failed rock star, failed husband. Well, he wasn't going to be a failure as a dad. Of that much he was determined. And he'd done his best for Kyle, hadn't he? He had provided a stable home, good food on the table, decent clothes on his back, holidays. Mike's parents had emigrated, so his grandmother, who was Kyle's great-grandmother, looked after the child for years while Mike had slogged away in a warehouse, driving forklift trucks to bring home the bacon. Then he'd gone on to the taxis, then the buses. Yeah, the ex-rock star was now a bus driver. Get over it. It was a decent job. Suki was a bus driver too. That's how they'd met. And they'd made a good life for the three of them, hadn't they? Things had turned out okay. Yet sometimes, in the thin hours before dawn, Mike would lie awake, one arm folded under his head, and think about how things could have been, of how close he'd come to really making it big. The money would have been great, but it was more than that. It was a feeling of having the world looking up at him, admiring him and the music he'd created. It was a validation, the dizzying rush of adrenaline, when applause rolled around him like a fluid wall of sound. He could be in a band now if he wanted to. Of course he could. He could still play. Though his hands now have thicker, stiffer, working man's fingers, and he was no spring chicken anymore. The long hair had gone, so had the waistline. Middle age is a bitch, and the entertainment business feeds on young meat. But he could still knock out a mean riff when he wanted to, when he had time to, between shifts at the depot, grocery shopping, family time, and jobs like painting this shed. The shed was nearly done now. There was only half a side left to coat with preservatives. And, actually, it had been ages since he'd picked up his guitar. The one thing which sometimes kept him awake, gnawing at him, was how he'd let his last chance slip away. Some months after the Midnight Express had fallen apart, an offer had dropped into his lap. Lead guitar in a decent but unsigned band that had just landed a support slot on a world tour with a major name. All expensive paid, massive exposure. It was the kind of juicy opportunity which unsigned musicians dream of. But how could he leave baby Kyle behind? Mike already asked too much of his grandmother, who did a fine job of looking after the infant while Mike was in work, but it would have been unfair to ask more of her. She wasn't exactly in the first flush of youth, and Kyle, like all babies, was demanding. And what kind of dad would he have been to leave his son behind? Even as he was turning the offer down, Mike intuitively knew this would be his last chance. But what choice did he have? Any right-minded person would have done the same. So he watched other musicians go on to fame and fortune while he clocked on at work. Mike prodded a blister on the side of his index finger. The handle of the paintbrush was sticky with preservative. He had green stuff under his nails, green trails up his wrist and forearm. His back was killing him, and his left knee was throbbing. But the shed was done. He snapped the plastic lid back onto the tub. There was enough preservative left to make it worth saving for next year. He shoved the tub onto a shelf in the shed, padlocked the door, then trudged over to the standpipe to rinse the brush. Brushes lived in a clean plant pot under the stairs. He didn't know why the brushes were kept separately from the tins of paint. This was just how they'd been stored for years, and he couldn't be bothered changing things around. As Mike stepped through the back door, Suki looked up from setting the table and said, "Dinner in 15. "I'll get cleaned up." Upstairs, their freshly ironed bus company uniforms were on side by side on hangers, ready for tomorrow. His colleagues didn't even know he could play a guitar. He and Suki and Kyle had a good life together. He had no cause to complain. He washed his hands under the bathroom tap and began scratching at the green gloop staining his skin. What else could he have done but knuckle down to the business of everyday living once his 15 minutes of fame were over? Many would envy him that much. Beyond the 16th minute, there had been a child to raise and bills to pay. And as minutes turned into months, then years, Mike had slowly come to accept that this ordinary life really was his life. Sometimes, though, the dream still burned. He'd lie in bed, listening to the sounds of a waking city snaking through the open window, and think about where he might have been, what he might have achieved. Susie's tousled head would be on the pillow next to his, and he knew just what she'd say if he woke her to ask if things were okay between them, if their lives were good enough. She'd say, "Oh, shut up, you idiot. You're a great dad, a decent guy. Now put the kettle on." Mike chuckled quietly as he dried his hands on a fresh, fluffy towel. His nose twitched with the enticing scent of spicy food wafting from downstairs. Yeah, life wasn't so bad. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little wistful story of what happens after your 15 minutes of fame have disappeared. If you did, leave me a little comment and click like, and hit the subscribe button and the little bell button. It'll remind you when the next video is due out, which will be next Thursday. Oh, my voice is gone now. Next Thursday about 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, see you then. Bye.